The slash is not waste. Forest biomass gets composted in the upper soil layer, recycling nutrients. The soil food web, which enables forest trees to grow, is dependent on having down forest biomass on the forest floor. Because Pacific Northwest forests store more carbon per acre than perhaps any other forest in the world, and half of that carbon is stored in the soil and decaying material. This is according to OSU scientist Olga Krankina. Biomass removal and inevitable erosion caused by heavy equipment and even direct removal contributes to climate change, just like the logging itself does. There is no scientific basis for the claim, then, that forest biomass is a renewable, clean, or green energy source. We need to also recognize creatures that live on the forest floor, particularly fungi. They are basically essential to the forest being able to recycle nutrients and grow. Fungi release digestive enzymes. They help break down the woody biomass and return it to the soil. Other microbes help in this whole process, and is really fundamental for forests to be able to stay healthy and grow. Paul Stamets, you may know of him, he's the founder of Fungi Perfecti, was recently on New Dimensions and talked about, how deforestation is causing the emergence of new diseases like bird flus, some of those being fairly fatal in other countries. And as we destroy the forest, we're also losing the organisms like fungi that have the potential to cure those diseases. He's found in some fungi that he's studying antiviral properties. So we could actually be killing off life-saving organisms by destroying our forest. We might not even ever know it. And he says that only about 10% of the fungi, we actually know much about them. We actually know what kind of properties they have that could help us. And again, the removal of forest biomass is also the removal of habitat. This species, the California tortoise shell butterfly, is dependent on the understory. Other insects and migratory birds have co-evolved with understory plant species. This could also have an impact on amphibians. We know that they're not doing very well, and there really has not been a single definitive study on the possible negative impacts of forest biomass extraction on the Northwest 33 species of frogs and salamanders. I was rather amused by some of the propaganda I saw in DC, but the scale of it, just the fact that it was everywhere, was kind of unnerving. Chevron had about 20 different posters just like this one, each one a little bit different, but people smiling and happy. This guy isn't so smiley, but other people were, and in the newspapers as well. As you might have heard that Weyerhaeuser and Chevron have kind of made a deal and have plans to be ramping up using forest biomass for liquid fuel. And I wanted to give you a quote, but really the point of that quote is just to say that when we call for large-scale change in terms of addressing climate change, in terms of our energy use, we have to consider the false solutions that are coming about at the same time. And the use of forest biomass for electricity and liquid fuel is really a false solution. And the quote I was going to give you is from Simone Lovera. But this billboard that I saw kind of conveys the same message. And I'll zoom in a minute. I was glad to see some counter-propaganda there. And it says, "The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress." And kind of my point is, like, we define, how long we're going to let Chevron destroy our climate, and what kind of solutions we develop. Ultimately, the public resources, taxpayer money, paychecks of rural people DeFazio wants to help are being given to Seneca to destroy the public trust. Seneca owns about 2,000 acres of tree farm, once forest in Oregon. They've logged public lands in the past and currently has been awarded the Trapper Old Growth Timber Sale along the Mackenzie, Eugene's drinking water source. Getting away from that, I just wanted to remind us as well, though, that even though we're thinking a lot at the moment about our own watershed, deforestation around the world is happening at an unprecedented scale and is actually happening at a faster rate in other countries, developing countries, with tropical rainforests. So I would just like us to keep in mind when we consume things like, I believe it's 89 gasoline, it's 10% biofuel. When we buy products like margarine that have palm oil or other oils in them, like that, they could actually be coming from once tropical forests that are now plantations, whether they're palm oil plantations or others, even soy. And it was very inspiring at this Power Shift summit that I went to. I went to a meeting of planning action in solidarity with other groups working to prepare for Copenhagen and to really put pressure on delegates to Copenhagen. And that is really our next chance to address climate change since Kyoto, so it's really important. And all the groups there were thinking about this. And there were a lot of forest groups involved. And they really think a lot about indigenous people that are impacted in their local communities about over deforestation, not just the global climate issue. But I think it's important for us to kind of keep in mind the plight that other people have around the world. And I'm going to cut this a little bit short because I'm worried that we're running out of time for our discussion. Some of these points I've already made. Really, I think we need to have large-scale change. We need to change the way things operate with our agencies, our relationship with corporations, and we need to basically change agency bureaucrats into trustees. We need to change consumers into beneficiaries of natural assets. And you've heard this from Mary Wood if you've gone to hear her presentations recently. But I think it's true, and she's right. We must also rethink property rights. There's trespass, there is spillover in bad forest practices that we need to account for. And even Oregon's public agencies in their policies state that the waterways and wildlife, even on private lands, are in the public domain. So we should hold them to those kinds of statements. Again, just considering future generations. This is a quote from a Supreme Court ruling in the Philippines that basically decided to cut off logging because of not having any forest left on their land for future generations. Lastly, what kind of solutions do we need? Certainly conservation and energy efficiency. We really need to decentralize. I think that's a huge thing, keeping in mind what plants like Seneca are doing and how that's really not sensible. It's not empowering local communities like we really need to have happen.